Greetings, true believers. Welcome back to the Alaska Bigfoot Studies. I am your host, Chuke. Well, I wanted to talk about languages that the Bigfoot might use, and I absolutely do believe that they use some sort of language, at the very least, primitive grunting and hand signs. But I've been camping out on hunting trips, and I've just heard this cackling baboon primate sound out in the forest. Now, maybe I need to get better at identifying sounds. It could be some strange bird or something making that sounds, but it just sounds something like that would belong in a tropical jungle, not in the woods and mountains of Alaska. So I'm going to look into that. Otherwise, I haven't heard crazy howls or something that I believe is a Bigfoot. I've heard bears making very strange sounds. But let's check in with Rob Roy Menzies and Baxter and see what they have to say about the subject. All right, I'm here with Rob Roy Menzies at the Bigfoot Art Gallery in Palmer, Alaska. Woo-hoo! Now, you get all kinds of people coming in here, telling stories.
Yes, all kinds of people.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah, all kinds of stories I get to hear in here.
I was going to ask you, what are your theories on Bigfoot communicating? Do they have a language? How do you think they communicate with each other?
They supposedly have a language. I want to say my experience is out at Area A. I've heard screaming.
Oh boy.
I've heard yelling. I've heard the whoop, which, ironically, it's exactly what it sounded like.
Really?
Whoop! It's just like that.
Wow.
It was so insanely but we heard it. It was so loud.
Different than the screaming and the yelling.
Oh yeah, much different. It was. I mean, there's a difference between a guy yelling and a whoop. Very primate, not like a bird.
Wow.
It didn't even register as a bird to me. It was more like a monkey or something. It was like this. Wow. You hear these gibbons and whatnot go whoop whoop whoop. They make these whooping sounds. That's what it sounded like. It was just one though.
Wow.
We all heard it. We couldn't tell where it came from.
Right.
But having a conversation, walking on a trail, and this whoop, and we both heard it over our conversation.
Wow.
I've also heard them yelling, and it sounds like everybody's got an old buddy that used to drink beer and just yell, right? Ah! That's kind of what I've heard that a couple times. Definitely a couple times. I've heard what sounds like a man way back in the woods just letting one, as loud and as long as he can go.
So very human-like sometimes.
Very human-like. Very, I've heard that twice out there, I want to say. I've heard it twice. And one time, it wasn't just me, Scotty and another gentleman heard it over a roaring fire and another couple that were being very noisy. But this thing we heard it over the fire and everything. It was just unbelievable. So the communication, the talking too,
really
is intriguing.
Okay.
And I've heard people out at Area A. I remember one time they said it sounded like deaf people talking.
Oh wow.
Very faint. And there is one recording that does have it, but you have to have headphones on. It's very far away.
Right.
But it is faint, and once you start hearing it, you got to play it over again. But it does. It sounds like a couple people, or three, having a conversation, and not anything against the deaf community or anything, but the speaking, how they speak. It's this kind of
Yeah.
You can't tell what they're saying, but you can hear it's human.
Wow.
It sounds human, but you don't. It's like a different language, kind of.
Interesting.
I have not heard that out there.
Right.
Other people have. One younger gentleman, the first year, second year I met him out there, he was telling us about the certain sound he heard out there, and he was trying to explain what it sounded like, and he started going down that, it was like this, what do you call those Japanese, and I said, samurai? He goes, yeah, sound like a samurai.
Wow.
And I'm like, ugh.
Very guttural.
And again, this is not this particular person, not a Bigfoot person. Not like they've listened to the Sierra sounds.
Right.
They don't know about the chattering and the Ron Moorhead tapes, but yet he's samurai. And that's what people refer to those, some of the audio as samurai sounds. That's what
Very,
it sounds like.
very guttural.
You know, very
Sharp.
Asian, you know, or Japanese sounding, you know, that quick, you know, vocal,
Wow.
just like some samurai.
Interesting.
So I was kind of shocked.
Yeah.
Like, what? No, this
It's an
can't be
interesting
happening.
take.
No way.
Yeah.
And again, this is just me. You know, I like looking into the fishbowl, observing people, and, you know, kind of being skeptical, like maybe it was a sea lion or something.
Yeah.
But, you know, these guys claim that they're hearing this stuff, and
Yeah.
it seems real credible. They're not out for entertainment or making money or anything. It's just, oh yeah, I heard it sound like this out there.
Wow.
So, you know, all we can do is note that down and
Right.
keep going.
Based on what you've heard, do you think that they just have very simple kind of grunting language, or do you think they have a developed language?
I think they have a developed language myself. If the Ron Moorhead tapes are authentic, which I think they are, that's definitely a language. There's nothing else it is, and they're chattering, and you can hear their emotion. We can all tell, like, when they're angry, or if the adult sounds like he's yelling at the younger ones.
Wow.
And I've heard interactions kind of like that before,
Right.
with sasquatches. You know, the females yelling at the male, you know, like, "Don't leave him alone," kind of thing. And
Wow.
people are just standing there freaked out by the whole thing. But I think they would definitely have to communicate. Again, they don't have cell phones,
Right.
so the sticks, the whacking, the whistles,
Yeah.
that all carries a long ways out in nature.
Right.
So it all makes sense with these abilities and what they use for communication.
Absolutely.
It does make sense when you're out in the woods. It may not seem as quite as sophisticated as us, but it does the same thing.
Very cool.
So,
Well, I appreciate it, and everybody check out the Bigfoot Art Gallery's Facebook page.
yeah.
Hey guys, Beans Baxter here from the Sasquatch podcast, and today we're talking about Bigfoot and language. Does Bigfoot have a language? So, probably the most well-known Bigfoot language evidence, I guess you could call it, would be the Sierra sounds. And when I first got into Bigfoot and first started researching things, and I heard about the Sierra sounds, I'm going to admit I was pretty skeptical of them. I'm still not 100% on them, but my reasoning was too is, you know, you hear all of this or see all this Bigfoot evidence with the videos and pictures, and it's all grainy and blurry, and it's all only a couple of seconds, and then all of a sudden you just have these like high definition audio recordings of Bigfoot sounds, and it was in the realm of, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. It's probably not real. And I only started to change my opinion on the Sierra sounds when I started to hear other people's experiences with similar sounds. And I have to admit myself, I've heard strange sounds in the woods when looking for Bigfoot. It sounds similar to the Sierra sounds. I can't say that I've heard the samurai chatter, but I have heard some strange things that were in the vein of the Sierra sounds. You know, often when you're out in the woods or out in nature, you hear a sound. Maybe you don't know what it is, but you can classify it. You can say that's a bird, that's canine, that's feline. You know, that is some kind of a small, that's a varmint. You know, that's a squirrel or a mouse or something. You know, you can classify sounds. And I've been out in the woods and I've heard things I couldn't classify. It's somewhere between human, animal, and something else. I heard a vocalization one time when we were out camping, and it was one of those I couldn't, like, the word, it sounds cliche, but the word that popped into my head was, "That's a monster." I mean, it sounded like some kind of T-Rex roar. So I don't know if Bigfoot has what we would call a language. I do think they have a means to communicate. I don't know if they have like specific words for trees or rocks or anything like that. some of the witness encounters would certainly lead you to believe that they do have a language and they do speak to each other. But at the same time, I know my dogs will often, when they're contentious over something, they will make sounds and grunts and groans and yelps. And I know they're trying to convey something to the other, but at the same time, I don't think it's a structured language. I think it's more like, I'm trying to get you to understand this. I'm going to use these certain tones. It's not, if I make this sound, it means there's treats over there. I think Bigfoot might kind of be in the same vein as to where they don't necessarily have a structured language, but they may have, a tone, like with dogs. Tone is a lot when you tell your dog to sit. When you're happy, your dog knows you're happy with them. When you're angry with your dog knows it. They can sense it through your tones, your body language. I think Bigfoot's probably pretty similar. There was an interesting account I heard out of Alaska. I believe it was on Prince of Wales Island. I could be wrong on that. It's been a while since I've read it. But there was a woman who was out camping, and it was raining, and she decided to go out and stoke the fire. She was afraid the fire was going to go out with the rain. And she goes out and she's tending to the fire, and she looks up, and there's a Bigfoot standing a little ways away, watching her tend the fire. And to this lady's credit, she wasn't freaked out. I think she was probably something of a believer. And instead of getting scared, she started to talk to the Bigfoot, and she was kind of like, "Oh, hey, it's nice to see you. I'm glad you're here. I had to come out and tend my fire because I was afraid it was going to go out and I wouldn't be able to get started again." And she said, when she said the word fire, I'm tending the fire, when she said that, the Bigfoot pointed at the fire. So, what does that mean? It could mean, the Bigfoot has spent a lot of time watching campers, and, what do you do when you go camping? You start a fire. There's the fire. We got to get the fire started, put another log on the fire. And I think if you watch somebody long enough, or a group of people long enough, you could probably pick up a few words here and there, tent, fire, things you talk about when you go camping, marshmallows even maybe. So that's an interesting account. I wish there were some more like that, because that would be super interesting. But other animals, I know my dogs know what certain words mean. If I use, they're in the room, so I can't really say too many of them, or they'll all get excited. But, if you say, "Hey, do you want a treat, or do you want this, or you want that?" A lot of times your dogs will perk up. So I don't think it's necessarily a sign of super intelligence on Bigfoot's part if they understand a few words. But it's also, I don't think, out of the question that they would have words of their own that they've made up eventually over time, if they have the range to emit vocal sounds. So yeah, I hope that someday we get a specimen that we can study, hopefully in the field and non-invasively, and safely. But I think that when we do, we will be surprised exactly at how much they understand and how much they can convey to each other, both through body language and vocals. I've said before, I think their main purpose in life is to stay hidden, remain stealthy. So in my mind, that leads me to believe they probably have a more developed body language system of communication than vocal. I'm sure they have to use vocals for long distance communication. Maybe that's why you hear so many yells and howls and things like that. But then when they're within sight of each other, and they want to remain hidden, why not use hand signals, body language, even facial expressions to convey information. So, I think Bigfoot probably does have a language, just not necessarily the way that we understand language, that we would call it a language. I think they do have a means of communication, but all animals pretty much do.
Well, there you have it. I appreciate everyone tuning into these videos. I've been getting a lot more views and interest the last couple months, and I'm very excited that we have an actual camping trip / investigation trip with Rob and beans scheduled for about 5 weeks from now. So very excited. We got a couple trips planned. But let me know what you think of the idea. I think that Bigfoot have a sophisticated language and that they use several different ways to converse over distances with tree knocking and screams, but we are going to look into it further and we may try some calling too. So thanks for tuning in. I'll have another Chuke Bigfoot cartoon Sunday morning goodness for you next week. Thanks guys, it's Chuke, your friend in the field.